How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, and it's a pleasure and an honor to have you finally on the channel to talk about some Rivers of Nile and the upcoming new album, The Work. Are you excited about this record?
Very excited. Very excited. Couldn't be more excited at a better time with everything going on.
I've had the pleasure of listening to this album. You guys blew like a 10-inch hole through my mind listening to this new album. Every time I think you guys cannot surprise me or do anything that I haven't seen or heard before, you release a new album.
Yeah, man. We try to blow the socks off everybody. That's the goal, dude. That's the goal.
How was the creative process behind this album? Was it different from previous records?
Um, yeah, it was a little bit different. But not that much different in terms of like how we all communicate the ideas and how we all build upon them as we were writing and creating the concept and themes musically and lyrically, building upon the ideas and sound structure that we want inside the album. Um, so I think our engagement with the creative process might have been a little bit differently, have been used or gone about differently than perhaps maybe like the previous writing process, like for Where Owls Know My Name or Monarchy or The Conscious Sea of the Light. Like we definitely were more interested in kind of expanding our, I would say, expanding our mind a little bit to kind of like let the music unfold through that process, so to speak. It kind of really shines through in the diversity, I think, from track to track on this album.
Is
Uh,
that diversity of sound perhaps the uniqueness of this album, or is there something else that you see being very unique to this record that perhaps wasn't there in the previous albums?
well, that's a good question. Like I associate the uniqueness, of course. I would say yes, like right off the bat, yes. But I would say the uniqueness of each creative uh, process that we have with each album is kind of directed towards the conceptualizing of the theme of the season and kind of like pulling in all of the sounds and structures or elements that we feel would make up what this particular season is speaking to us, and this particular album, where we're from, Reading, had kind of a moderate influence, not only just in some of the preliminary sounds that you hear throughout the album, but kind of like just the enveloping of what the work represents and where we came from in a way. The process of initiation this band has been on, not just with this record, but through all the records and the process of creating this art and making it. So there was definitely a unique step here for sure.
Are you guys a band that spends more time looking forward than looking behind you to see what you have done already?
Yeah, I think what, maybe it's a good balance of the two, but I think when it comes to being creative, we're definitely we're looking forward. When it comes to making something new, we're not looking behind us. We're not looking through the rearview mirror. You know what I mean? We're kind of like looking for signs and attractions along the way and things that might be a manifesto of the intention that we have set for this record, and we'll pull off there and maybe kind of experiment with this sound or experiment with this theme or this idea, and see if it fits, and then we'll come back in our vehicle and we'll keep moving forward. So, it is kind of like that, and not taking away from anyone does anything differently, but that's kind of always been, I think, even though the lineup has changed, even still with the change over the years, we've all kind of had that desire to keep it fresh, to keep it interesting. But with inside that fresh and interesting and uniqueness, there's a sound that people familiarize with maybe our name or with each of us, So I know in metal, it's it's not a super common thing. I mean, although it's more common now than ever before. Like a lot of unique bands are going in their own direction, kind of creating, very unique sounds that, like, obviously are influence or a product of this or product of that, but they're doing it so well that it sounds like something that has never really crisscrossed that way and stitched itself in such a pattern that now has a whole new look to it, has a whole new sound to it, yeah, I kind of think that's kind of the direction we like to move in,
And you were talking a little bit about the concept, the creation, the drive towards that concept when you're going through the creative process. I listened to this album 10 times. Every time I came out of it with a different concept of what the album was all about. So it's one of those records that I think if I listen to it 20, 30, 40 times, I'm still going to come out with a different idea of what your vision was, because I'm trying to understand it. And it's just, I'm getting different ideas coming from it. Are you guys comfortable with putting the fans through that kind of process of second guessing ourselves in terms of what was this album really about? I think it adds to the playability of the record because it kept me coming back for more and more. But is that something that you're interested to see what the feedback is going to be from the fans?
Oh, of course. That means it works. You know what I mean? Like, in that sense, if you create something that when you create something that's symbolic, it means it can have a very particular meaning to it, but it's open to interpretation. And it means that the language of what the story is trying to say can be subject to change based upon the situation that the person's coming from, stepping into it, listening to it. Like each day that you listen to it or each time that you listen to it, you're experiencing probably a different part of yourself now hearing it from the previous time. And now your mind is, or whatever, is experiencing it that many more times, and now you have a preliminary understanding of it, or you're getting into it, and it builds upon itself. It's a really interesting process, listening to an album, because you can listen to an album however many times and you can hear however many different ways. And I think that's really cool with this kind of music, and it really depends upon the listener. I think if the listener is able to hear it different ways, that is more of what the story is about than maybe the story trying to specifically say one thing.
Yeah.
But who knows? I could be wrong. I don't know.
It's more about the journey than getting to that final destination, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what the work represents. The work represents the journey.
The journey.
The journey and the art of it. It's understanding that the work has a very particular, ideology, like definition when we think of it, especially when we personalize the concept of work outside of what we're talking about now, this album. We think of what work is to us in our real life, working or something that we have to do or something that puts in time and effort. But any of those things, whether they're one thing or the other, when we do it enough times, it transpires that feeling of it just being work. But it still has those rigid edges. It still has that mechanical grind, and you got to go hard and you got to do it. But it transpires then into an art, and you feel it in different ways than just it being something that yeah, not speaking in terms of the band, but like in terms of how we identify something that would be work, like it feels like something more than that. And you that's kind of, the fiery passion of being in a band, it's hard work. It's really hard work. But the passion for it, which is the appreciation of the arts and knowing what they do for us and knowing how they allow us to express ourselves in ways that we may not even understand right away, but maybe we'll understand later on, is a really, really sacred thing. It's a really beautiful thing, and it's great to have such a community and an outlet to do those things, because um, I wouldn't say I'm the most metalhead in the world, but I couldn't see my life without it, man. Like it's really helped me in a lot of ways, be able to be myself and to also be able to express myself. Like a lot of the world outside of me sometimes doesn't make sense. It makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. And when I come here and when I go to shows and when I play music, when we write music, it still doesn't always make sense, but it's like I understand the creative process and the mysteriousness behind of it. You know what I mean? Like how it can unfold, and I like that. I think we all do. We all like, being surprised by things that are familiar, but yet still kind of limitless. There's no telling a good, when an artist we love writes an album, how they're going to surprise us next. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And we're talking about the journey. I have to ask you about this. Do you feel like this is a record where you guys are forcing the listener down a path in terms of the structure that you guys created with the tracking listing? Or is this an album that allows the listener to kind of be on the driver's seat and come at it from different angles? Where do you see the strength of this record? Is it with one or the other?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me see if I got the question correctly. So you're asking like, is this album more of like a listen from beginning to end, or is it like an album that can just be tossed around and listened to?
Exactly. When you have those two options, which one do you feel gives the album a better output, if you will?
It's just gonna sound really weird, but I'm gonna say both. And because I mean, like, I feel I always recommend anyone listen to a record from beginning to end, beyond just the ability to maybe absorb the record the way it was meant to be absorbed. But it's a disciplinary thing. If you could sit there and listen to the record all the way from beginning to end, you allowed yourself to become, a little bit more patient and able to sit there and listen to something without getting up and going. But at the same time, the person may want to jump from track to track with this record, because there really is a lot of diversity in what's going on. And there also might be a lot of favorites, depending upon where the person, was introduced to the record, what track they were introduced to. I don't think there's any right or wrong way about it. There's a preferred way, but like I think you can do both. I don't want to be the person to say there's only one way. You know what I mean? Because that's just not fun. But yeah.
And with the diversity of sound that this record has, how did you tackle that with your vocals? Because I felt like you also brought a lot of diversity with your vocals onto this record. Was the merger of what do you want to do vocally on this album with what was happening on the sound side, was that an easy thing to come together for you?
It was a different process than before. But yes, I would say it was easy because there was less thought put into it. A lot of Biggs writes majority of the lyrics for this record, and we kind of like helped each other, point each other in a certain direction with certain songs and whatnot. But a lot of the material, I didn't really know how it was going to go. And so it was right there in the booth, going to the ghost track and kind of like feeling out what he had in mind and then putting my own take on it. So that was a really interesting process, but I got a lot out of it. And it allowed me to be intimately attached to each take upon the given moment of doing it, but not having to sit back and have to overthink it, have it over exercise it. And I think my I think my deliverance on this record, it was probably the best I've done, with this. It was really easy for me. There's a lot of screaming, and got a lot of talking vocals that I do, and between the two, it was a lot of fun.
From my end, it felt very organic. It felt very raw. It was almost like we were getting a sense of what your inner thoughts are, but you were exteriorizing those inner thoughts throughout these tracks. So it didn't feel like that there was any boundaries on you. I just felt like I was in the room with you, and you're just being absolutely open. Like you were naked in front of us, vocally, just giving us what you had in that moment. That's the perception that I got.
Then you know what? Then you got the right one. You got the right one, because honestly, like, that is always my biggest goal, because the kind of vocals I do, I am a feeling vocalist. The projection of my voice is to make it feel as raw and alive, and it's like, you got to feel what I'm going through this part, and if you don't, it's like you said, there's kind of an element missing there, and I recognize that on my past records. On the past records, there's some tracks that, like, I feel I'm really punched in on that level of feeling, and the rawness. And I really wanted to make that, very, very reoccurrent and persistent on this record. So, I'm glad it worked then.
Oh, it definitely, you definitely delivered. You definitely delivered. I got one last question for you, and I mean, we couldn't be talking about Rivers of Nihil and me not bringing up the saxophone. You guys brought it back on this record. I felt that you guys used it a lot differently on this album. It had a different connotation. It brought something different to the soundscape. Was that your goal, to bring an element that has become such an integral part of when fans think of Rivers of Nihil, but at the same time not repeat the same formula of the past?
Yeah, I think that's a very it was. I mean, you know what? I didn't play the sax part, so I'm just gonna go off of, like, my creative opinion. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I will say that, like, it's something, from what I know of these guys, and writing music with them for a while, I think we knew how those particular saxophone parts on the last record really had a sit well with you, feeling kind of like very memorable at home, kind of feeling. And we wanted, we obviously wanted to have the presence of the saxophone on this record, but we didn't want it to be the same thing. I'm sure, and this is, I could be wrong, but we didn't want it to be the same thing that was on the last record. And not that we didn't want it to be as, and I'm not even going to say that. We didn't want it to be the same thing. We didn't want it to be the same thing as the last record. Not that this one isn't as memorable as the one before
yeah.
because it's
It
still
is.
new and still fresh. And not saying that it's not either. It's just something different. And I think the fact that we're keeping it different allows it to be something stronger than what could be predictable. You know what I mean? And for to be predictable, even if it's an element that everyone likes a lot and they like the way it was done in that particular way, to have it different than that way before is more important, I think, for us than to have it the same way before, because it's, again, exercising our forwardness in hearing things in a new way, and maybe allowing this whole new way to settle the same way that last record settled, even though they sound moderately different. You know, the saxophone, we knew we wanted to, you know, keep that aspect there. We, you know, and I mean, Zach, this is really a Zach question. A Zach and Brody question, but that's just what I personally
Your feel.
pick up on. That's my view on that.
Well,
Yeah.
Jay, thank you very much for your time today, man. I really appreciate chatting with you. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the channel. Say hi to the guys for me. I hope to see you guys in Toronto again down the road, playing this album live. Best of luck to all of you with the release on September 24th, the work, Rivers of Nile.
Thank you, Pedro. It's really good talking to you. I really enjoy watching your reaction videos. You guys are awesome. I look forward to seeing you guys soon. And,
dude, we have nothing but love for all of you guys. You know that. Like, and anything you guys need from us, even a place to crash when you guys come to Toronto, you hit me up. You let me know. Whatever we can do for you guys, my door is always open.
Thank you, Pedro. You're awesome, man. I can't wait to see you. You have a good one. All right.
You too, man. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.